Our event today is sponsored by both the Corcoran Center for Real Estate and Urban Action and the Schiller Institute for Integrated Science and Society. The Corcoran Center was endowed by the late Joseph E. Corcoran 10 years ago. The Corcoran Center started as a single class hosted at the Carroll School of Management. Today, the center's interdisciplinary engagement has grown to 10 classes, an internship program, an annual case competition, and on-campus and off-campus engagement in community events like this, the second annual Real Estate Week. Boston College Schiller Institute for Integrated Science and Society is designed to create multidisciplinary, collaborative research processes to address critical societal issues in the areas of energy, health, and the environment. Without further ado, I'll briefly introduce our guest tonight. Michael Lane is Senior Associate of Investment Asset Management at Davis Companies and a young alum of Boston College. He supports the company's investment strategy and assists with the underwriting, market research, and due diligence process for new deals made on behalf of its value-add investment funds. Please join me in welcoming Michael back to the Heights.
Well, thanks, everyone. I graduated BC in 2018 with a concentration in finance and managing for social impact and the public good. A big portion of that was the Corcoran Center and the classes that it had. Really left a big impact on me to look at real estate, which was something I was interested in, not just as the bricks and sticks, but as kind of a lasting legacy that it leaves on. It lasts for 50 plus years, the buildings you build, and that has a real impact on everyone, the community and people that live around the area. So learning about the people side of real estate was really a big part of my kind of college formation. I'll just give a brief background of the Davis Companies here. We're a private equity company that's an owner, developer, investor in real estate. We go across asset classes and all across kind of the U.S., but mostly in the East Coast. And we were founded 47 years ago by John Davis, and he started out really focusing in Boston and has built up this company to kind of what it is now today. Bunch of different asset classes here. And then, so let's get into what we're here to talk about today, which is this little plot of land that we bought over in Everett. So just to give some context to where this site is here, it's highlighted in red and yellow. Here it's in Everett, which is right along the Mystic River. It's, within 2.5 miles of downtown Boston, Kendall Square and the airport, very proximate to kind of all of the major demand nodes in Greater Boston, and more holistically, Greater Boston's kind of been and has always been and continues to be one of the strongest real estate markets in the U.S. So we love it. It's in our backyard, and continue to see a lot of great opportunities there. The other thing to note, so this property here, it's 100 acres. It's the largest privately owned development site within 5 miles of downtown Boston. Boston's been settled for almost 400 years, and there's the land's been used up. There's a lot of water here, and not a lot of opportunities to get real sites in scale. So more specifically here, you have the site outlined in red here. The purple is some rail lines that go along, and what we really find attractive here is the proximity to downtown Boston, Kendall Square, the major institutions. Fortunately, BC is a little farther out, but that's what we really find exciting here, and it's just been an extremely undeveloped piece of land. So this is a little bit what it looks like today. A little bit more closer, you have the Encore Casino, which was built in 2018. And it has been it's been used as an oil refinery and oil storage by ExxonMobil and predecessors since 1921, so over 100 years here. Just because it wasn't kind of well pictured in there, we also have, as part of this, a dock which was used to offload oil through these pipe racks. You can kind of see the pipe racks through and pumped up into the tank farm, as it's called here, and into all of these very large tanks. You can it's really tough to get a sense of the scale of this site because you have to zoom so far out. If you just look at some of the size of those trucks and stuff, you can kind of get a sense. So this is the marine dock here. Very deep, a very deep port here. There's depths of up to 40 feet along it. Just as a sense, the Port of Boston just dredged its port to try to get to 30 feet. So this is, has a lot of potential here. These are massive oil tankers that were coming in here, coming from all over the world. I'm here to talk about the site that we own, which is in red. We really tend to look at this as more of a kind of a district here. So this is the Lower Broadway district of Everett. Everett's kind of split into two areas: the industrial waterfront, which is shown here, and then a very dense residential population north of the site. So what we find really attractive about this district is that there's a small number of landowners that control a lot of land. And as you try to really, rapidly transform an area, it really helps to have, single owners and people that can move in scale. So that's what we find attractive. So this whole area was rezoned by the city of Everett in mid-2010s. They saw it as an opportunity to really rethink how this industrial waterfront has been viewed. And really what they were trying to do is encourage the Encore Casino, which you see here in the foreground on the left, to come in. So that was awarded in 2015. It was a former Monsanto plant. It was also contaminated. They had everything from sulfur to cyanide to oil in the soil and in the water. So a little bit dirtier than our site, but that has been successfully redeveloped here into, I think there's over 1,000 keys. It's actually been the best performing hotel in and around Greater Boston. Encore, in addition to the kind of casino proper, they've gone ahead and acquired over 80 parcels in addition to that. So you can see kind of where it says Encore 12 acres. Those are a lot of single and two family houses that they bought up kind of through the 2010s. Now with plans to expand there as well. In March of last year, they bought this old Mystic generating station, which you can see right on the waterfront. This was, I think, at one point the largest power plant in its time, which is built in the 20s or 30s. It has now been unused for a long time. The newer plant, which is next to it in green here, is actually not that new, and it's set to end its operations in May of this year. It's really used right now for peak demand, so the hottest days of summer, the coldest days of winter, when the grid can't really support this power plant kicks into effect. So it's not used that much. It's fed by natural gas, which you can see there are two tanks not highlighted there. That's also Constellation. They take in natural gas from, they actually import it from around the world. It's the only site in the US that takes in natural gas from ships from outside of the US. Pretty much everywhere else in the US, we get our natural gas from the United States and export it elsewhere. So a little bit unique there. Some other properties here. You have the MBTA in yellow on the left side. That's a big bus repair and maintenance facility. You have Sprague Energy here in the light blue. That used to be part of this former Exxon site. In 2001, they sold it off to Sprague for asphalt batching. And then you have a National Grid has about 16 acres there in the foreground, and then Schnitzer Steel. That's the largest scrapyard in New England. They take metal, shred it up, and put it loaded onto ships and send it to China and other places to be further recycled. And then you have some more areas kind of as you go further east, as you're kind of looking north here. The Island End River peeks into the background there. And so that's why we kind of view this whole area in the screen is about 500 acres. So you can't really talk about our site without talking about kind of the larger picture here. This just goes into a little bit of what Encore is planning here. So they have the 1,000 room hotel. They're planning now on these adjacent sites. Their first phase is a concert hall with nearly 1,000 seat performance center. The current casino doesn't have any space for performers to come in. They're going to have additional gambling there, nightclubs, day clubs, food and beverage. And then they're planning 2 hotels of about 800 keys, some additional food and beverage up there. And then if we go back here in orange, they are right now lobbying the state to get that relieved from what's called Chapter 91 in the designated port area, which is a state legislation that limits the areas around water to water-dependent uses, trying to preserve access to the water for those who need it. So they're trying to get that lifted to put in a soccer stadium for the New England Revolution. New England Revolution's owned by the Kraft family. They currently play out of Foxborough. They were one of the founding teams. They are the only original team without a soccer-specific stadium and without an urban stadium. So Rob Kraft's done a lot in his lifetime. This is kind of one of the last things that he wants to kind of leave as his legacy is to build this. So going on, so just talk about the site, the history, and what it looks like today. So this is one picture from the 40s here. You have our site in the background. You can kind of see it off to the distance here. You can see the power plants that I mentioned, as well as where now the Schnitzer Steel recycling facility was formerly something else. But this area has kind of always been really an industrial area. It has really been passed by in times for further development. Going on here, these pictures are mostly from the 50s here in the top left and on the right. As you can see, a lot of burping, belching, smokestacks, not the most environmentally sustainable uses. In the bottom left, that's a picture from 1928. There was an explosion at the site. It killed 14 and injured 36 people. Flames were 200 feet high. And this area's had a lot of fires back in the 20s. It has been always an area that the residents of Everett have not really liked, to put it succinctly. Today, this is what the site looks like. Not very exciting here. There are these massive tanks here with basins around them. You can kind of see berms around it. That's to contain any oil that's spilled, to try to keep it close. This whole area was filled tidelands, so it has a very low elevation. It's very susceptible to flooding. And Exxon was actually in a lawsuit with the Conservation Law Foundation prior to selling it because they didn't allege to have not done enough to prevent stormwater from taking contaminants off-site into the river, into the harbor, elsewhere. Another picture on the left, this is the top of a bunker here. This bunker here is 15 feet above ground, 15 feet below ground, could fit 1.5 million gallons of water or oil, originally oil, most recently water. They're massive. They're about like 3 acres big, which is a couple of football fields. And on the right, this is what the marine dock looks like today, looking towards the casino. This is just another view. You can see again the tanks really in disrepair here. Nothing really of value of them. But what we find really interesting is the city of Everett, like I said, has kind of always had this as a thorn in its back, and they've really viewed the opportunity of this coming to market and being bought by a developer as the opportunity to change the perception of the city of Everett. Yeah.
given you mentioned it that the residents haven't been a big fan of the area for years, what's taken so long? What's been the opposing pushback to redevelop this area?
It's just been owned by ExxonMobil, and they've been using it as they were using it up until about 2018. They started to kind of prepare the site to be sold and started winding down operations. But really, it's and nobody wanted to touch it. It's been known to be contaminated. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. There's a thing called release tracking numbers, which is how the state tracks environmentally contaminated areas. This was one of the, if you look at the numbers, this is a very low number. It was one of the first sites identified by the state as a contaminated area. Exxon didn't want to sell it. They didn't really want to do anything because they are Exxon and they know that they're a big target to be sued. So they wanted to get rid of it. They didn't want to do the decommissioning and the remediation themselves. It's a lot more expensive for them to do it because they have to just go so much further because they are so worried about lawsuits, which they've been sued in other states, other countries for things like this. So it's here. But you can also see just kind of the proximity to Boston. You know, it's tough to, you don't get many views like this where you have such an industrial wasteland next to the city of Boston. Going to talk a little bit more about Everett here because I don't think you can go without talking about it. But Everett was the fastest growing community in and around Boston from 2010 to 2020. Whereas, you know, we're in a northeastern city. A lot of people have been moving down south or elsewhere. Boston's not necessarily growing too much. Everett's kind of the exception here. It has seen a huge increase in migration into it. A lot of this kind of earlier in the 2000s was driven by a lot of immigration from other countries. People coming to Everett because it was more affordable than other places. And then more recently in 2020 and to be in the future, it's been multifamily development that's been coming in. Owners like Greystar, who's a massive residential developer, has about 1,600 units either that they're just delivering or under construction with. It's projected to grow another 12% over the next 10 years, which will also be the highest of all inner suburban areas. Looking at a little bit of the makeup here of the resident population, what I think is very unique and one stat that really sticks out here is the concentration of foreign-born people in the city of Everett. Even comparing it to places like Somerville and Chelsea, East Boston, other places known to have seen a lot of immigration, Everett far surpassed that. Nearly half of the people that live in Everett were born outside of the United States. A lot of that immigration has come from Central and Southern America. And this is kind of where the people of Everett work. And I should mention, the city of Everett's always been a haven of immigration. Traditionally, previously it was mostly Irish and Italian. Now, like I said, has moved more towards Central and Latin, Southern America. So, you know, the majority of people that work in Everett, they are not really have the opportunity to have the highest wage earning jobs. Those abilities are not here. People in Everett tend to commute much further than other surrounding communities to their jobs. The opportunities just really aren't there in their hometown. So, like I said, there's been a lot of multifamily development, a lot of housing built and permitted in the area. But now the city's really looking for jobs. That's what they want to see. They want to see jobs and, you know, really high paying and growth potential jobs. And then just to give a sense, just shows you kind of average rents in and around Boston. So the most expensive places, no surprise, Back Bay, the Seaport, downtown Boston, Cambridge, really the most expensive places. But as you start to look and move north, it's still proximate to Boston, but you see a lot more affordable rents here. I will say that a big reason of this is the lack of transportation that is provided in this area. It is difficult to get to the city of Boston from some of these areas. It's mostly served by bus routes. There is the blue line that extends up through East Boston and Revere, and the orange line goes up through Somerville into Medford. But Everett's kind of been Everett and Chelsea both have kind of been left on the wayside here. So what do we have the potential to do here? Like I said, it's more than just a development here. It's more than just the 100 acres. It's more than just building a building, which typically as developers, we look at, one building or two buildings together. We really have the opportunity here to create something more, which is a community. So these are just some of the topics kind of that we're looking to hit. So on the environmental side, in typical ESG fashion, environmental side, first and foremost, this is a brownfield site. It's been used, again, 100 years as an oil refinery. It's contaminated. So we're going to work to clean up the site and reduce its carbon footprint by removing it as an oil refinery and storage, and bring in new, sustainable development, clean energy uses, green spaces, and flood resiliency. As I said, it's very low-lying elevation. This used to be filled tidelands. So we are going to import soil to raise the site up to try to prevent flooding. On the social side, right off the bat, this whole area is fenced off. You can't walk anywhere on it. It's not publicly accessible at all. So future development will allow for people to just access the site, access the water. Additionally, the city of Everett has been identified both as an environmental justice community by the state of Massachusetts, which there's a number of factors that go into, but put simply, this is a population that has a lot of contamination surrounding it without kind of the resources to fight back. It's also a gateway city, which is another list that, or a name that the city or the state designates to these type of areas. Job creation, as I mentioned, that's a big priority of the city. We're looking to bring different commercial uses here to create jobs, and public transit as well. As I said, it's very underserved here. That is a big priority of our development, is to try to bring more public transit in, both for the residents of Everett and the users of our development. And on the government side here, multiple stakeholders, many stakeholders involved here, working with the city directly, talking about what their views are of the city, what they would like to see, how we can work together on that. When we first started working on this project, we were planning about 1 million square feet of industrial only, and it was only industrial. I know this is an industrial night, so I don't want to talk down upon that, but probably wasn't the best use of the site from the view of the city of Everett. And they, we had conversations about that, and they said, we really want to see other higher, better uses here. So that's stakeholder and diversity and inclusion, always looking forward. The Davis Company has a long history of working with underrepresented groups to bring them into ownership, to bring them into contracting, vendors, etc. Our lead contractor on the remediation is a minority-owned business as well. So what's our vision kind of here? It's really a mix of uses. It's not the 100% industrial use like I had mentioned before. This is just a snapshot of one portion, kind of what we're looking for here. Right in the middle here, the green space, public realm. We want this to be not just a place for the tenants and the residents of our direct development, but really somewhere that all of Everett and the surrounding communities can enjoy. We're planning multifamily housing here, high density commercial. I can get into more of that, but what does that mean in today's environment? We could build a lot of office here. That's probably not the smartest idea given the uses and trends in office right now. Life science, similarly, has been facing a lot of headwinds recently. We are still planning some industrial warehouse distribution. Boston is extremely dense place. There is still a demand to have storage or distribution located close to these population centers. And then finally, what we are calling high-tech manufacturing. You might have heard it called a bunch of different things from different people: tough tech, clean tech, all of the techs. A lot of what the Schiller Center is doing. As I walked up here and seeing the maker spaces here, that's exactly what we're looking for, to really create a community for that. And we find this is probably the most interesting and attractive use in the near term. There is not really the opportunity so these maker spaces, they need large footprints, they need a lot of land, and these users have generally been pushed well outside of the city limits because of that. Competing land uses by lab and industrial have just made it economically infeasible for them. So they've been moving to places like Devens, Massachusetts, which is an hour north of Boston, just to get the acreage and the space that they need to create these 1.5 story buildings where they can do a lot of different things. I have some slides as to why I'm being so vague there, because every one of these users uses their space extremely differently. This just shows kind of what this whole site could look like when it's fully built out. This, I want to say, probably takes a decade, if not more, to happen. But you can see here, as you look on the right side, not lit up, the areas not part of our development are very industrial and are likely to remain that way. So when we talk about distribution and industrial, that probably tends to stay on the eastern portion of the site, keeping with the context. But as you move to the west and to Broadway, you can't see the casino, but it would be bottom left here. We think there's an opportunity for higher density uses. Again, what those are is still to be determined. And then residential as well here to be used. Also, I should probably go back to a better version of it, but because of these two power plants that have been here, and as you can see what's not highlighted here, it's very ugly looking holes in the donut. That's owned by Eversource, which is a big utility provider. It's a big substation. It is the transformer station for all of for these two power plants. So they need to connect into the power grid somehow, and this is the location where they do it. So think about it as kind of Boston's main power strip. As these come offline, the power sockets are being unplugged, and there's now capacity to plug back into it. So what we find extremely interesting here, and something we frankly didn't realize when we first started looking at this, is the opportunity to bring in clean energy uses. So that can be anything from the generation of it through wind, solar, tidal ways, to storage of it, like something like battery storage, because for wind and solar, electricity needs to be used in the same instant that it's generated. So the sun's not always shining, the wind's not always blowing. So how do you bridge those gaps? Battery storage is a crucial part of transforming into the green economy here. And we uniquely have the opportunity where we have existing infrastructure that we can plug into here, which is very unique. Skipping back. Going in, so this is back to the tough tech flex R&D. There's a million names for it. These are just 3 examples of companies that are in Boston right now. So Boston Dynamics, you may have seen the robotic dogs online, the ones that are going to take over the world someday. They're based out of Waltham. You can see their space, kind of a mix of office, but also, maker space like you would see here in this building. In the center, you have Commonwealth Fusion, who is really attempting, they're in the clean energy space, fascinating company looking to kind of revolutionize how power is created. This is a massive building. You can get a sense for it a little bit in that bottom picture. That's about 3 or 4 stories tall with massive cranes to move very heavy machinery. And then on the right here, Vulcan Forms. They're 3D printing. As you can see, these massive machineries. So this high-tech manufacturing, what is it? It's from a developer's perspective who is building and permitting a box for these users to go into. What do we have to create to entice them? And it's a large footprint that they can use very flexibly for their needs with a lot of power. All of these users, it's a pretty common theme, is they need a lot of power that doesn't really exist in many locations in and around Boston. It's density potential. So the site here, it is currently zoned. There's underlying zoning here that allows for a 1.0 FAR. So FAR is Florida area ratio. It's a measure of the square footage of building over the square footage of the site. So if you have a 100 square foot rectangle and you build a 100 square foot building on it, you have a 1.0 FAR. Now you can move that single story building to 2 floors and take up half of the footprint. You still have 100 square feet on 100 square feet, still a 1.0 FAR. So that's a measure in real estate as to density, how much space is there given your location here. What I was showing you here is somewhere between a 0.8 FAR and a 1.1 or 1.2 FAR. That's generally viewed as fairly low density. It may not look like it. But so on 100 acres here, a 1 FAR would be about 4 million square feet. The zoning allows through a special permit process for a 4.0 FAR, which would be 16 million square feet. It's like 4 times the size of this. It's hard to kind of rationalize what that looks like. Think New York City, think downtown Boston. It'd be difficult to park that here, but what our role in here as developers is to first decommission, tear down all the tanks, clean up the site, and entitle it for uses, whether we are the future developer or somebody else is. So thinking about what could possibly go here, and not just what you can permit, but what you can actually build. Like I said, you can build massive skyscraping office towers here, but there's not going to be users to fill it. So here are just some examples of kind of, places that you may know in and around Boston. So the Seaport, extremely successful development here. It was parking lots 20 years ago, as you see on the left. Today, it looks like on the right, and that's a 3.5 FAR, just to give you a sense here is what that is. It's 8 million square feet, 55 acres. Again, we're nearly twice that size. Cambridge Crossing, another very successful development, which has seen a lot of life science lab. That is a 2.5 FAR, 4.6 million square feet. Again, we're more than double this size. And then,
Point out exactly where it is on the map there.
Yeah, sure. So this is the site here, which was located right here. You can see it here as old rail yards. You have downtown Boston, the North End, and then Kendall Square in Cambridge, MIT, located there. MIT and Kendall Square is really the epicenter of life sciences. It is the highest rental rates across the globe for lab space. It is where everyone wants to be. They need to be near these research institutions because the PhDs, the faculties are teaching one day and working in the lab doing research the next day. And then finally, Assembly Row, which is actually very close to our site. You can see it on the left. We've called it out here. A little bit further out from Boston, this is in Somerville, which is very proximate to Everett, right across the river. Extremely successful. This is a great Saturday afternoon if you make your way out there. They've seen actually a lot of success with retail. There's a lot of outlet shopping there, as well as now, because of the success they've had on the retail side, on the multifamily side, they've attracted life science users for about 1.7 million square feet, which is under construction now. Again, this here is a 1.7 FAR, so a little bit closer to what we're targeting. But again, there's a lot more to go. That is what I have prepared. This site, there is so much going on that I can't possibly fit it all into a presentation, nor do I think anyone would want me to. So I welcome the opportunity to ask questions, have a dialogue. I'm happy to go extremely more in depth, probably more in depth than you'd like on any specific topic. Sure.
What's the process of cleaning up a brownfield like?
Yeah, all right. That's a good question that I didn't really address. So there are pretty much kind of four main phases here. What's a good picture for it? Talk about here. Maybe here. So the first thing is the decommissioning of the actual activities there. So like I mentioned, Exxon knew that they were, shutting down activities here and they were going to sell it. So what they claimed is they drained all these tanks of oil down to puddles. We have to go through and actually make sure that that's the case and that there's not oil somewhere around here. Again, huge site, easier said than done. So that'll be the first. It will be going through, severing all the lines, all the pipelines. There are pipelines here that run underground to Waltham and to Dracut, like massive lines. I think actually the Waltham one goes all the way to Springfield. Those have been filled with concrete at this point. So the first step is just kind of shutting everything down and then quickly moving into the demolition of the tank. So our first phase is take everything down. All the tanks, the bunkers, as I pointed out, crushing those and putting them in place. So those are kind of the first steps, and we're intentionally doing that all kind of as quickly and all at once as possible because we think as a marketing tool, seeing 100 acres of clear land is pretty interesting. So once that's happened, then we move into the actual soil remediation. So you may have heard about this with other developments. You may have not have. So there's contamination in a lot of real estate developments that are not, there's greenfields and there's brownfields when you talk about real estate development. Greenfields, easiest way to think about it is a patch of grass, something that has never been used before. That could also, it could be something else, but typically not contaminated. This is brownfield. It has contamination. So the way you can do that is there's two options. One, you can take all that dirty soil and take it off of your site and put it to a disposal site. Those are basically like landfills for soil. They're usually very far away from Boston, potentially in other states or potentially elsewhere, or even just further out in Massachusetts. That's very expensive to do because you have to pay for it being loaded up, you have to pay for the transportation, and then you have to pay the disposal site to take it. That makes, when you think about developing in an urban setting, usually on a smaller site, that makes the cost of remediation very, very expensive on a per acre, per square foot basis. What's interesting about this site is that it's such a large site is that we can keep all of the soil in place. So our strategy here is the contamination here is mostly from the 60s. It is mostly all oil contamination, which is good and bad. One, it's contamination, it's oil. Two is, but the good side is that oil remediation is actually very well known. The technologies have been around for decades and decades. So it's very well understood. And basically what you do is you go identify where those spills are, where the hot spots are, and you mix it with grout and cement to stabilize it so that it does not spread anymore. And then naturally over time, oil's an organic compound, it will break down over time. So that's the remediation part. And then we move into the more so kind of resiliency and capping. So if you've kept the soil in place, in order to reach, Massachusetts has a plan for a list of regulations for how you remediate these sites. What you next have to do is place a cap over it, which is just more dirt, cleaner dirt, not necessarily Home Depot topsoil, but non-contaminated soil. So that's between 1 to 3 feet of soil that you put on top. Yeah, do you have it? Okay.
I was gonna say, and you said you also are planning on doing that anyways because it's marsh.
Yeah, exactly. So we need to put at least 1 to 3 feet of soil on top to cap it, and you put a marker, which is like a fabric, basically, that if anyone digs, they hit that, they say, no, I'm not going to dig anymore. So that would be, we could do that and reach regulatory closeout and be fine. But as you brought up, because this is very susceptible to storm surges, and interesting enough, the storm actually wouldn't come from the Mystic River, which is here in the front. It would come around where it would come up through here and really flood this whole area, which is kind of interesting, the lower levels. So we plan on raising the site about 10 feet across kind of everything. As you saw in one of those pictures, it's a very uneven site because of the berms around it. So it's flattening that out, but on average, bringing it up 10 feet. So we're planning to import soil here as well. And that soil can come from other developments in Boston. Again, it's the same kind of idea. If you are building an office building in downtown Boston and you need a parking garage below, you got to dig that soil up, and where do you put it? So we're planning to bring in about 10 feet of soil to lift that up. So that's what we call our resiliency soil versus our capping soil. They may be one and the same thing, but they're broken out as two different things. And then the fourth and final phase is just making it pad ready, which is really it's putting up fences, not until the areas are ready for development. There are things called AULs, which is an activity use limitation. So once this site is remediated, there will still be some restrictions. We can't have low density houses. You can't have a single family house with a backyard where a toddler can go play outside and eat the dirt. That's a risk. So there's certain uses that we need to prepare for. It's putting up retaining walls, making sure the site is just structurally sound to kind of exist until it's ready to be developed. So those are really the 4 stages of it. Yeah.
Are there similar examples of other developments in cities that face the same challenges and have the same demographics as Everett that have been successful?
We have looked far and wide, and the answer is really no. This is an extremely unique development. There's one group called Hilco, which has done some of this. They have a large project outside of Philadelphia. That's an old oil refinery, and they're pursuing a similar strategy. There's other smaller scale sites and groups that have done this, but this is pretty unique for kind of the magnitude of it. I think this will be the largest brownfield remediation by acreage in Massachusetts history. So there's not a lot of good examples, which has been a fun hurdle to try to overcome with getting ourselves comfortable with the investment, bringing in investors and convincing them that we know what we're doing. So we studied this site and pursued the acquisition for over 2 years. I would say typically on a real estate deal, if we're buying an industrial building or something, we will work on a deal for 2 months. This was 2.5 years, pretty much. There was a ton. There were 30,000 pages of documents onto the historical contamination and conditions here. So there was a lot of what we call due diligence done, but it's a pretty unique site. Yeah, from that. There is another group when we were initially doing this. Another bidder was actually a group because what I didn't touch upon here is the liability associated with this. So when you're going through, now we own the site. We bought the site back in December, I should say. Now, if we're going through our remediation and all of a sudden we find out that oil has seeped onto an adjacent property, those owners could turn around and sue us. We didn't cause the contamination, but we're the owners, so we have to deal with that. The ways that we're going about that is working with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to receive a Brownfield covenant not to sue, which is a legal protection saying it's kind of like being a white knight. We're saying we're committing to cleaning up the site, and in return, you can't sue us for things that happen during our ownership. Once we bring it to what's called permanent solution, which is it's remediated, then that continues on to successive owners and whatnot. That also provides protection from third parties. So we sent out notification to all the adjacent landowners saying, we're about to do this. Do you have a problem with us now? Bring it forward. If not, you can't sue us in the future.
Do you get government assistance, like in terms of money or like tax benefits for
We certainly would like some and need some. This is a massive undertaking. The remediation, which is somewhat of $100 million, is just one portion of what. So we kind of view this first as like horizontal development, then vertical development. So the vertical development, very easy. It's the building of buildings, but horizontal is like, how do you prepare this site? It's been used 100 years for one thing. It doesn't have, the sewer. It doesn't have utilities. It doesn't have all of these things. A road network. All these things that are all going to serve the city of Everett as well. So there are certain subsidies and grants and different things that we're all going to be pursuing to try to get some financial support. So as Assembly Row, which is back here, received, I think, $35 million in public support. Cambridge Crossing received, I think, $25 million. So we're hoping that we can receive some of those dollars. Again, because what we're doing, a lot of it is infrastructure that's going to benefit, the city and its residents. I don't know what the best slide to leave it on is.
How long do you estimate the remediation itself to take?
Yeah. So that's in total, it's 3 to 4 years for everything. It won't be all at once completed. We'll be able to free up certain portions of the site within 1.5 years, say. Interestingly, that's a good slide. The area here in the foreground, like this area here, is actually one of the cleanest areas, and doesn't really require much remediation. So once we take the tanks down and do some limited remediation, that will be to be freed up, in about 1.5 years. Whereas portions like the bunker tanks, which are kind of in the background there, it's just going to take a long time to crush those and to do everything. Yep.
If there's no more questions, I can go ahead and jump in first. Thank
Great.
you. This
Yeah.
is such an amazing project and so interesting. And this actually isn't a question that I had written, but I was thinking of it while you were talking. I was just curious, what was so promising about this project to make you pick it, and what seemed like it would be worth it in the end with such a risk?
Yeah. So this is a highly unusual deal for my company to do. So we're a private equity company that, not to get too technical, but we invest out of funds that are raised. So investors give us their money and they say in 5 to 6 years, I want my money back, plus a return. As I said earlier, that's going to take 10 plus years. We're not really a group that should be doing this. Typically, you see groups like high net worths, which are very rich people, typically who have, can just put money somewhere and in 20 years they want it, back or something. That would be more typical here. So it's a little bit unique for us. What's interesting is that the amount of risk and remediation that's involved, really kept a lot of groups out of it. We're a group that tends to take on very challenging opportunities. And so that's why it really limited the competition in terms of our investors. And then as I talked about density, so we're planning, somewhere around a 1, if not below that. But we have the opportunity to go to double, triple, quadruple that. So the upside potential is really enormous. But we spent 2.5 years on this. We spent millions of dollars before we even owned it in the pursuit of it. A lot of I ran, I think, 480 financial models on it. We, like I said, 30,000 pages of documents, just incredible amounts of time. So it was a huge resource to suck, but the opportunity to control 100 acres this close to Boston is so unique. Like I said, it's the largest privately owned and the only above 50 acres within 5 miles, development site within 5 miles of Boston. So what we really thought is we thought this could be a good deal kind of on our base case lowest assumptions with a lot of opportunity to really outperform that.
I don't know if you ever mentioned it or if I should ask, but how much was it to purchase that?
Yeah, that's a matter of public record. So no worries. So we purchased this for $72.5 million, which is about 72,500 per acre, which is in a lot of ways a very good deal. Typically, when we're looking at buying land sites in these areas, it can go $2, $3, $4, $5 million per acre. We have to put a lot of money into it in order to make this like a feasible development site, all the remediation. And then if you're talking about, smaller sites in downtown Boston, so actually Cambridge Crossing, which I showed earlier, once that was permitted and sold, that was like 6.5 million per acre that it sold for. So yeah, we had actually first brought this under agreement before in 2022 when the economy was great, everything was great, for a lot more money, numerous times the amount that we did, that we ended up purchasing for. Then inflation, the war in Ukraine, a lot of things kind of changed the economic background, and we were able to retrade and tie it up for a lot smaller of a price. But so yeah, in a lot of ways, it's seen as very attractive in that sense.
So this is obviously a large-scale project, and I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about how something like this big gets started and what that process looks like.
Started in what way?
Just starting with you started with the research, and then obviously the real estate transaction, and then what sort of next steps to get going.
So yeah, this one was brought to market through a broker. The company, we call it it was on market. It's typical to a realtor selling a house. So it was broadcasted to a lot of different groups. And we knew that it was going to be a lot of information to get ahead of. We thought we were being savvy and dug into it like a month before it was actually released because we knew it was coming. It turns out 2 years later that month didn't really mean that much. But, it first starts off by just trying to understand, what could go here. Kind of trying to think first about the end value here. So what can you put here? Like I said, at first it was 1 million square feet of industrial. 1 million square feet of industrial, how much does a square foot of industrial land trade for? Multiply that times 1 million, and then say, all right, what are my costs to get it to a point where you have a development ready site? So that's understanding. We all knew it was the remediation. That's really the easy part of identifying. And so just trying to comb through that and understand. We have never done anything like this either, so this was new to us. We connected with a geotech and environmental consultant that's very well known in the area, who directed us to a remediation contractor who has done stuff like this. They worked on the casino site that was the old Monsanto plant. So it was working a lot with those groups and trying to understand, what all of this was going to entail. And then working through as well, speaking with the city and talking about what they want for the permitting exercise. And like I said, talking with them, we found out quickly that it wasn't going to be all industrial, which at the time had the highest land value. It was the most valuable use of it. That's now somewhat changed, but so it was kind of, so those are really the two kind of main focus points. And then once we got comfortable with those, it's all right, how do we come up with all the money to do this? We bring in our fund investors as well.
Yeah. So you talked about clean energy a lot before. I was wondering if you could talk about construction a little bit and potential for making, or any talk of making like net zero buildings,
Yeah.
anything of that sort.
Yeah. So we that is something. The whole idea of really bringing sustainability to real estate has just becoming increasingly important, and you really see it from the largest investors of the world, groups that you would recognize around the table, like insurance companies like MetLife and Prudential. These groups are now, it's a mandate for them that what they invest in must have some sustainability, and it's more than just sustainability, it's ESG in general. I actually think, the Corcoran companies and Joe Corcoran were really leaders in that, of thinking not just about real estate as a deal, but as how does it impact a community and how do you work with a community? So it's interesting now that a lot of those, great things that he kind of led the way with are now becoming, before in a lot of times, even 5 years ago, it was like a nice to have. It was a nice thing to put in your marketing deck. Now it's a requirement from a lot of these investors. It must have, sustainability. It must have all these things. We're a little bit too far away to really think about what level of, so real estate development generally is classified into LEED certifications, which are just how they generalize things. Like LEED Platinum's the most sustainable you can be, LEED Gold, LEED Silver. It goes down. We haven't set necessarily goals for those yet. We may not be the developer for all of this, but we are thinking about every way that we can bring sustainability in here. Both, one, because we think it's the right thing to do, and two, because I think it's a really good marketing story for here. We're already doing this, brownfield remediation, and I think the whole, marketing aspect of it is what I find very fascinating. It's like, what's the identity of this project as we try to go out to sell it or to lease it to people? What are its core values? And so bringing sustainability into everything we can is super important to us. We're working, there are groups that are doing kind of net zero concrete. Even it's Sublime Companies is one. Like, groups like that, thinking about how we can bring them into the process. A lot of times they're more expensive. So, and our returns are what keep our lights on. They keep me employed. So, these are very serious things that we have to weigh. But we think that the benefits definitely outweigh the cost premiums for a lot of these things.
Can I ask a question? I know that you've talked about the rail lines that are
Yes.
all around this place. And has there been any thought about how those rail lines might be able to be repurposed into passenger use or light rail passageways towards making this place a little bit more residential?
Yeah, absolutely. These are all, like I said, these are rails that have been highlighted, and then the orange line is connected by where you can see the T here. It's a pipe dream to think that we could get an orange line extension or something to bring. The MBTA has enough problems on its hands already, and that's a long process to begin with. But what we do have here is rail, is existing rail. So what you see here, kind of in the foreground that loops around, is actually a rail that's used by the commuter rail. So not part of the lighter rail, but extends out. I'm actually not sure what line this is, but it does connect to Chelsea. Chelsea has a stop on the commuter rail. So we're saying, hey, you have a rail that's going right by this district. Can we add a stop here? That's when you asked about public subsidies or something. That's like a prime example of something that could be used. Those dollars could be put towards the soccer stadium, the proposed soccer stadium. 28,000 seats. They are planning 75 parking spaces. So yeah, the math doesn't really add up there. They need public transit as well. Right now their plan is to serve it off of the closest T there, which is Sullivan Square. But they're interested in, this whole area really deserves public transit. The Silver Line it was recently extended to Chelsea as well. We're exploring ways to try to get that extended along this rail. So the Silver Line, for those not familiar, it's a bus that has its own dedicated lanes, underground, above ground, and operates sometimes kind of on a track. So continuing it along this bottom rail would be a great step. And the state has actually already explored plans to try to extend it to get to Sullivan Square. The original, if I go back to some of these historic slides, you can see here, the orange line actually used to come through here and ended here in Everett in the 60s or 70s. That was removed. So this area used to have public transit and it was taken away from them. So are there ways to bring that back? And that's, why the MBTA still has a space there. So figuring out ways to unlock that is a huge priority for us, both to increase the multifamily, the residents, and also in commercial tenants, their employees have to get to work somehow, as well as, and it's a great thing because it also benefits, the residents of Everett as well.
If there's no more questions, I could go ahead and wrap up with the last one. So, what advice would you share with students for trying to get into the industry? Sorry, and if you could talk about like what steps you took and anything you wish you knew early on in your career or during your job search.
Sure. I know this was marketed to more than just people interested in real estate. I think you're environmental studies. Yes. Yeah. Anyone else in other sides other than real estate as well? Anyone else interested in other things? Are you here for real estate? That's great. Well, first off, I think I was very fortunate going to BC and being surrounded by both the Corcoran Center and a lot of really great mentors who really pointed me in the right direction. I've been asked this question before, and it's tough because I feel like I was actually given very good guidance. But what I would say is, early on in one of my first interviews for a job, someone said, real estate's not that complicated at the end of the day. It's actually very simple. So you don't the most important things really when you're hiring someone young is, do they have a desire to be in it? Do they have a passion for it? Have they demonstrated it? Whenever we were looking to hire in my current job or old jobs, it's like, a lot of people will say oh, I like real estate because my family's in it. My family's in it too. That's why I was interested. But okay, what have you done about that? Have you taken, if it's a BC student, it's tough for them because I know the opportunities that they could have done. Are you involved in the Corcoran Center? Have you gone to events? Are you involved in the real estate club? All these things, demonstrating an interest is really important. Because just having that passion and being eager to learn is really the most important thing. You can learn real estate while working in it, and you don't need to have that much prior knowledge. You can learn it on the job, but you can't teach someone the willingness to work hard and to want to devote themselves to it. For the real estate industry, but I think it goes for everything. Networking is incredibly important. I sat in one of these meetings when I was a student and heard about someone making hundreds of flashcards with everyone that they met and laying them all out. I tell every single person that's how you get a job in real estate or in anything else is you need to reach out to as many people as you can. What is it, Eagle Link, I think, or the thing? Submitting a resume there, closing your laptop, it's not going to get you very far. Your job's not done until you have the offer. Reach out to people. BC has an incredible alumni network. Search the company, look for any BC alum, email them, and it's not just, companies that have jobs on the table. Real estate's it's not like the big banks like Citi that comes here and says, we're going to hire 10 BC kids every single year. Real estate's not going to come to you. You have to go to it. So reaching out to those alumni, even when there's not jobs on the tables, getting to know people. You're one thing I wish I did a little bit my senior year, but I wish I had done more of is, you have access to Boston on the Green Line or an Uber or whatever, get into Boston, meet people face to face. It means so much more than an email. I get a million emails every January when seniors come back before last semester and they've had the conversation with their family. What are you doing? I know exactly what it is. Everyone always reaches out that same week. Be out there, meet people face to face, and spread your net as wide as possible. You never know what's going to hit. I was reaching out to everyone I possibly could when I was looking for jobs. And what really was cool about that is even people that, there was no offer on the table or anything, they weren't hiring or whatever. Now that I'm working in the industry, I now am working with those people in my job, which is kind of cool. They'll say oh, your BC email keeps popping up when I type things in. It's funny. So really just getting out there. But then also, if you're interested in real estate or really anything else, a lot of people find real estate later on in life, which is something I like, is that people have very diverse backgrounds. When you're in college is pretty much the only time when you can really explore different things. So take classes that are, you find interesting that aren't necessarily exactly the career path you want. I took a Jesuits in film class that I thought was going to be a once a week easy movie class, but I had to write 1,000-word essay every single time, and my professor was very strict on the how we wrote. But it was one of the best learning experience of I didn't think I was a good writer before. I grew immensely during that time, and anything in business, if I deal with numbers every day, but also writing is incredibly important. Succinct business writing, especially. just even writing emails, things like that. So, explore those different skills. Don't only think that you need to do career-driven things. Take things that interest you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.